Hello and welcome to Carlson Software. This short video is the second of a two-part series on how you can use Carlson CAD standards to define a standard of your own for a client or maybe your own company internal use. The first of the series provides a general overview of the CAD standards modules and a tutorial on how to create drawings which adhere to a standard. We're using some of the graphics from that lesson for this one, so if you're unfamiliar with Carlson's CAD standards or have not watched part 1, you might want to do so before viewing this. The Carlson CAD Standards Manager provides write access to a standards database and allows you to define items by selecting existing sample graphics as a basis for whatever you wish to define as a standard. In this way, you can either use existing drawings you may have or draw some standard items which you know to be similar as a basis for defining new ones. In general, you can use any CAD commands to create or modify sample symbols, line work, and text annotation with or without leaders as a basis for defining standard items. You can see here the drawing we used in part 1 where we referenced some existing roadway design data and added some topographic detail in an adjacent parcel with the aid of some Google Earth imagery. So we begin by initializing the CAD Standards Manager, which is only available from the pull-down menu. In addition to the National CAD Standard delivered in the Settings folder, there is an empty.sdb database file as well. As the name implies, there are no items defined in it, and we'll first copy it to a name of our choosing as a basis for defining a new standard. To do that, I'll just right-click over empty.sdb, and then I'm just going to select copy. I'll right click again and click paste, and I'll click on that to rename this to something like VIP client.sdb and press open. And you can note here that there's nothing in it if I hover over the pencil icon. The first thing I'm going to do is unpin or tear off this window. And I can do that by either clicking on this pin button here or just press and hold the left mouse button on the title bar, and I'll just drag it wherever I like. And if I now right click on this floating window, I get a context sensitive menu, and that contains all the standard item definition and editing commands the manager provides. As you can see, this includes defining new folders, some import and export options, adding, deleting, and modifying items, and some preferences you can set for any standard that you define. Anything already drawn forms the basis for any item you wish to standardize. So you can use all the primitive CAD commands you already know to draw example graphics, or you can use drawings you already have, which you know are drawn to a desired standard. Let's use the graphics drawn in part 1 to define some items which we will then further modify. Let's see, beginning with this tree symbol, we'll change it so that a user is no longer bothered with that rotation angle. To do that, we just right click on the standards window and select insert item. And we go back and select one of those tree symbols that we drew earlier at the select object prompt. This brings us up a tab dialog which presents us with and offers all the CAD standard specific options associated with any item. If you hover the mouse over any of the fields, you'll get a quick help tooltip that tells you what that field represents. And note that each item name actually consists of 3 independent fields. They are optionally separated by prefixes and suffixes for readability, and for which the defaults are part of the preferences command we just mentioned. The combination of these fields forms a default label, which you can see here, and that forms the basis for the default annotation of any standard item if there is an annotation component present. So we're going to go ahead and just give it name tree and under rotation change it to fixed, which means that the value will not be solicited from the designer. Other options are previous and first, in which case the designer would only define one rotation for a series of insertions. See that if we now click OK and insert this item, all that's required is an insertion point. As a further modification, let's add some attributes to the symbol definition. One way to do this is to right-click and select the block editor, and then I'm going to pick the Define Attribute tool here and give a tag and a prompt for a size for the tree. Change that text height a bit and say OK. Drop in the attribute and let's define one more, call it species. And we'll use the same prompt, everything else the same, and drop it in. And now close the block editor and save that definition to the drawing. If we now right click and say modify item, you'll notice the attributes area of the properties shows up. We're going to enable allowing a move of those attributes, which now if we go ahead and draw another one of these tree symbols, you'll notice as we drop it in there's no rotation and we're prompted for a size. We'll give it 12-inch and a species of maple. Just click OK. And you notice the attributes are now dynamically being dragged around for alternative placement. If we drop another instance in, you see the previous values are retained, and instead of keying in, I can also select text from the drawing to modify those attribute values. Now we'll change the building symbology that we placed, as well as make sure that it's always closed for the operator placing it. To do that, we just select it together with the annotation and right click for the properties, and just go in and make sure we have the polyline representing the building, and we'll change its color to white, and we'll also modify the line type from a dashed line to a continuous line. And as a further modification, we will change the line weight to, I like to use a 0 pen, which is 0.35 millimeters. Since the graphics are already selected, we just go back and say Insert Item, and now we can just type over this name, and we will call it WF House, or Wood Frame House. Click OK. And now if we go ahead and dismiss the properties dialog and select that item for placement, and I'll just draw in a field over here, a fictitious one, you notice that it is continuously closed as we enter vertices, and the default text is the name that we gave it. I'll turn on my line weight display, and you can also see the effect of the change in the symbology. Now we'll modify the sidewalk a bit to show how offsets can be used. Sidewalks come in standard widths, and if we pan our view over here a little bit and measure the width of this one, it looks like, well, we'll call it about a 4-footer. To define it as an item, I just go back and say Insert Item and select one that we drew, and I will call it a walkway and give it a characteristic of 4-foot width. And you see that appears now. If we now turn around and modify that item, notice that we have an area here for offsets and a button for insert, which we can go back and insert the same item, meaning walkway, and we'll put it at an offset of 4 feet. Now to draw that, I'm going to delete, well, let's delete the other side, and then just go back and select it, and I'm going to trace over the left side that we originally drew using my snaps, get to the end here, and now you notice I have a prompt for an identification of which side to offset. If we return to that wood frame house item, we can show that we can also inject masks on annotation to clip out any graphics passing through it. I just selected Modify Item and click on the Annotation tab and enable the mask here under Properties at 1.25 or 25% surround. Accept that and go back to place a fictitious example and you can see that effect. An item is captured into the folder which was right-clicked on when choosing Insert Item. If I now choose New Item Folder and create one entitled Buildings, you can see that I can just select the two building-related items using a drag window, and then I'll make sure that the tree item is not highlighted and just use drag and drop to drag that selection into the folder I just created. To show you how to import an existing symbol library, I'll first create another item folder and we'll call it Symbols. The CAD Standards Manager Import Symbol Library command provides a utility to capture existing symbols and their directory structure. And the command first requests any CAD standard specific parameters to be applied to each symbol drawing file it finds. And that's followed by a target folder from which to begin capturing them. You can see here that this folder contains a number of subfolders to group the drawings it contains, and the command will preserve the folder structure on disk at whatever level you elect to import. I'm just going to take the top level folder and you'll see a progress bar as it does so, and an informational message indicating how many symbols were found at each level. CAD Standards also maintains a extended search path accessible through the Item Database Preferences command, and all subfolders containing symbols are recorded in this path. In this way, structured symbol libraries on shared network drives will be accessible to all merely by attaching the standards database. There are no configuration changes to it or the underlying CAD platform necessary. As that completes now, a summary will be shown to us how many symbols and folders were imported. And as you can see, in this case we have a total of 81 items collected in 18 folders. If we open up the symbols directory now and browse, you can observe how the directory structure on disk was preserved. The CAD Standards module can share your item definitions with Carlson's Layer Library and Field to Finish modules. For the Layer Library, we just right-click at the level we wish to export and select Export Layer Library. For the layer file, I'll again use the name VIP Client, and upon completion, CAD Standards Manager informs us that it exported 82 entries in 18 folders. To attach the layer library we created, we can just use Settings, Layer Library, and select the Load option at the bottom of the dialog. Then we just select the file we just created, and if we take a moment to browse the results, we can see that the CAD standard structure has been preserved and the appropriate fields have been filled in. To export to Field to Finish, we use much the same procedure. Again, we right-click at the level we wish to export and select Export Field to Finish. This time we're prompted for the name of a .fld file to create, for which we again use the name VIP Client. When completed, again informs us of the number of entries exported. Now let's have a look at the results by switching to the Survey menu and selecting Survey, Draw Field to Finish, Set Code Table, and selecting the VIP Client file we just created. Field to Finish may not recognize all the extended folders for the symbols, so for now we can just choose Skip All, and then we can view and further modify the results if necessary. Here we're using Edit Codes and Points. Finally, deletion of items and or folders is a straightforward procedure of selecting the folders and or items you wish to remove, and then just right-clicking and selecting Delete Item or by pressing the delete key. Note that this command is fused so that you can cancel the operation. Thanks for watching this video, and be sure and check out the many other informative videos available.